It started that night.
The world's most prolific serial killer might never have been caught if he had known how to use a computer properly. Imagine a person committing serial killings who was also a friend to his own victims, a well-known figure in the town, and on top of that, a doctor. This is the astonishing story of Dr. Harold Shipman, who used his clinic not to save lives, but to take them. In Hyde, a small town in England where barely 30,000 people lived, he carried out serial killings right under everyone's noses for 23 years. Even after putting more than 250 people into an eternal sleep, no one suspected Dr. Harold Shipman, and perhaps they never would have if he hadn't made one small mistake. What was his motive for killing? Why wasn't he caught for so long? And what clue did the police find that exposed years of slaughter in a single moment? This is the complete story of Britain's Dr. Death. Harold Frederick Shipman was born on January 14, 1946, in Nottingham, England. He came from a working-class family. His father was a truck driver, an ordinary man working hard to make ends meet. But his mother, Vera Shipman, had different dreams for her son. She pushed Harold relentlessly toward academic success. She wanted him to rise above their station, to become someone important, someone respected. Vera's ambitions weren't just hopes, they were demands, and Harold absorbed them. He grew up believing he was special, superior to those around him. He had few friends in school. Other children found him arrogant, cold, distant, but Harold didn't care. He was destined for greatness. His mother told him so every single day. Then, on Christmas Eve, 1961, everything changed. Vera Shipman was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. Harold was just 15 years old. He watched his vibrant, strong-willed mother waste away over the next 18 months. The cancer ravaged her body. The pain became unbearable, but there was relief. Every afternoon, their family doctor would visit. He would prepare a syringe filled with morphine and inject it into Vera's arm. Within minutes, the agony would fade from her face. She would relax. Sometimes she would even smile. Harold was fascinated. He would watch the transformation from suffering to peace, all from a simple injection. The doctor held the power of life and death in that small syringe. He could take away pain. He could grant mercy. Vera Shipman died on June 21, 1963. Harold was 17 years old. At her funeral, he told relatives he had decided to become a doctor. He wanted to help people the way the doctor had helped his mother. But something else had taken root in Harold's mind. Something darker. The memory of watching his mother die peacefully. Morphine flowing through her veins would haunt him for the rest of his life. And years later, he would recreate that scene again and again and again, with over 250 victims in 1970. Harold Shipman graduated from Leeds School of Medicine. He was 24 years old, newly married to a woman named Primrose Oxtoby, and starting a family. He seemed destined for a respectable career in medicine. His first job was at Pontefract General Infirmary in West Yorkshire. He worked there for 3.5 years, gaining experience, building his reputation. Nobody suspected that during this time, between 1971 and 1974, Shipman may have already started killing. The Shipman Inquiry would later investigate 24 suspicious deaths from this period, though conclusive evidence was impossible to obtain. In March 1974, Shipman joined a group practice at the Abraham Ormerod Medical Center in Todmorden, a small town in West Yorkshire. He quickly became popular with patients. He was attentive, thorough, always willing to listen. He modernized the practice's record-keeping systems. He got involved in community activities, joining organizations like the Rochdale Canal Commission. But his colleagues began noticing something strange. Shipman was having blackouts in public setting episodes where he would seem to lose consciousness. At first, they thought he might have epilepsy. They were concerned. They wanted to help him. Then the pharmacy logs revealed the truth. Shipman was prescribing massive quantities of pathidina, powerful opiate painkiller similar to morphine, to his patients. When the pharmacy contacted the patients, none of them admitted to receiving the drug. None of them had even been prescribed it. Shipman was stealing it for himself. He had become addicted. When confronted by his colleagues in July 1975, Shipman broke down and confessed. He claimed he had accidentally tried pethidine during medical school and had been unable to stop. The blackouts were actually him passing out from drug use. His partners gave him an ultimatum: go to a drug rehabilitation facility or lose your job. Shipman agreed. He checked into the retreat in York for treatment, but in November 1975, before he could complete rehabilitation, Shipman was arrested and charged with forgery of prescriptions, obtaining drugs by deception, and unlawful possession of pethidine. The evidence was overwhelming. Police had found track marks on his arms where he'd been injecting himself. He appeared in court. He was convicted. He was fined 600 pounds, equivalent to over £10 today. And then, incredibly, he was allowed to continue practicing medicine. The General Medical Council did not strike him off the medical register. They didn't ban him from treating patients. They simply issued a warning and let him go. This decision would cost hundreds of lives. After his conviction, the Shipman family disappeared from Todmorden. Harold took a temporary job with the National Coal Board in Doncaster, doing physical examinations on miners. Then, in February 1976, he worked briefly in County Durham for the Southwest Durham Health Authority, but by 1977, he had secured a new position at Donnybrook Medical Center in Hyde, Greater Manchester, as part of a group practice. Hyde was a quiet town of about 30,000 people, close-knit, traditional, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where people trusted their doctor implicitly. It was the perfect hunting ground. Shipman worked at Donnybrook for 15 years, slowly building his reputation. He was known as a caring, dedicated physician. He made house calls, something many younger doctors refused to do. He would spend extra time with elderly patients, listening to their stories, their worries, their loneliness. Many of them lived alone. Many had outlived their spouses, their friends. They were isolated, vulnerable, and they trusted Dr. Shipman completely. Some patients trusted him so much they gave him keys to their homes. "Just let yourself in, doctor," they would say. "I might not hear the doorbell." Shipman accepted these keys. He kept them, and he used them in 1992. Shipman left Donnybrook to work at another practice called The Surgery. Then, in 1993, he opened his own clinic at 21 Market Street in Hyde. He was now completely independent, answerable to no one. His killing accelerated dramatically. By this point, Shipman had perfected his method. It was chillingly simple, devastatingly effective, and almost impossible to detect. Dr. Shipman targeted elderly patients who lived alone, usually women in their 70s and 80s, people whose deaths would not seem suspicious, people who had no close family nearby to ask difficult questions. He would make a house call. "Just checking on you, Mrs. Smith," he would say warmly. "How are you feeling today?" He would take their blood pressure, listen to their heart, ask about their medications, and then he would say, "I think you need an injection, just a little something to help with the pain." The patient would nod. They trusted him. Why wouldn't they? He was their doctor. Shipman would prepare the syringe in front of them, but the syringe didn't contain medicine. It contained a massive dose of diamorphine medical-grade heroin, enough to kill a person within minutes. He would inject them, sometimes in the arm, sometimes in the leg. Then he would sit down and wait. The patient would begin to feel drowsy, just the medicine taking effect. Shipman would assure them, "Close your eyes and rest." Within 5 to 10 minutes, they would lose consciousness. Their breathing would slow. Their heart rate would drop. And then they would simply stop breathing. Shipman would check for a pulse. Finding none, He would arrange the body. He would position them sitting upright in a chair, hands folded in their lap, dressed in clean clothes. He wanted them to look peaceful, natural, like they had simply drifted off to sleep. Then he would leave. Sometimes he would wait an hour or two before discovering the body. He would phone the police and say, "I'm calling to report the death of one of my patients. I visited her this morning and she seemed fine, but I had a bad feeling, so I came back to check on her. I'm afraid she's passed away." Other times, a friend or neighbor would find the body and call Shipman. He would arrive, examine the body briefly, and shake his head sadly. "I'm afraid she's gone. Her heart, most likely. She'd been having problems. It's a blessing, really. No suffering, okay?" Then came the crucial part, the death certificate. In England, when someone dies, their doctor must fill out a death certificate stating the cause of death. If the death seems natural heart failure, stroke, old age, no further investigation is required. The body can be buried or cremated without an autopsy. Shipman would write the death certificate himself. Cause of death: coronary thrombosis, or stroke, or heart failure. Natural causes. Nothing suspicious, but there was a problem. For cremation, British law required a second doctor to countersign the death certificate. This was meant to be a safeguarding, independent check to make sure nothing suspicious had occurred. Shipman solved this problem easily. The second doctor was usually a colleague, someone who trusted him, someone who wouldn't ask difficult questions. Often it was a friend. Shipman would hand them the certificate. "Old Mrs. Jones passed away yesterday. Heart attack. Poor thing. Could you countersign this for me?" The doctor would sign without hesitation. Why wouldn't they? Dr. Shipman was a respected member of the community. If he said someone died of natural causes, they believed him. And just like that, the evidence was destroyed. The body was cremated. Ashes scattered. No possibility of exhumation. No way to test for poisons. The perfect crime by the mid-1990s. Shipman was killing at an extraordinary rate. Between 1992 and 1998, murdered at least 143 people, an average of more than 2 victims per month. In February 1998 alone, he killed 7 patients in just 4 weeks. People began to notice. Deborah Massey, a local undertaker, realized that she was picking up an unusually high number of bodies from Dr. Shipman's practice, and they all looked the same. Elderly women, sitting upright, fully dressed, no signs of distress. Death didn't usually look that peaceful. Death was messy, undignified. But Shipman's patients all seemed to have simply fallen asleep. She mentioned her concerns to colleagues. But what could she say? That a doctor's patients were dying too peacefully? It sounded absurd. Then, in March 1998, Dr. Linda Reynolds, who worked at Brook Practice directly opposite Shipman's surgery, noticed something alarming. In just 3 months, 16 of Shipman's patients had died and been cremated. Her practice had 3 times as many patients, yet only 14 deaths in the same period. Dr. Reynolds did some research. She discovered that most of Shipman's deceased patients were elderly women. They died at home. They died shortly after visits from Shipman, and they were all cremated dying. Shipman's recommendation. This was not normal. On March 24, 1998, Dr. Reynolds reported her concerns to John Pollard, the coroner for Greater Manchester South. She wrote a detailed report outlining her suspicions. She didn't directly accuse Shipman of murder that would have been career suicide without proof, but she made it clear something was wrong. The coroner contacted the Greater Manchester Police. An investigation was opened. Detective Inspector David Smith was assigned to the case, but the investigation was half-hearted from the start. D. Smith interviewed Dr. Reynolds, but he didn't take her seriously. He talked to Dr. Jeremy Banks, who worked with Shipman, and was reassured that everything was fine. He visited the crematorium, but didn't examine the cremation certificates in detail. Most critically, Dr. Reynolds told D. Smith that two of Shipman's recent patients, Mrs. Lily Higgins and Miss Ada Warburton, had died within the past few weeks. Their bodies had not yet been cremated. They could be exhumed. Autopsies could be performed. Toxicology tests could detect diamorphine. D. Smith did nothing. He didn't pursue autopsies. He didn't inform the coroner that Shipman might be poisoning his patients. He simply closed the investigation after 1 month, concluding there was insufficient evidence of wrongdoing later. The Shipman inquiry would confirm that Shipman had murdered both Mrs. Higgins and Miss Ada Warburton if their bodies had been tested in March 1998. Shipman would have been caught immediately. Instead, he went free, and he killed 3 more people within weeks. On June 23, 1998, 81-year-old Kathleen Grundy visited Dr. Shipman's surgery to have her ears syringed, a routine procedure to remove earwax. It was a mundane appointment, nothing special. Shipman told her he was conducting a research study on blood pressure in the elderly. Would she be willing to participate? She agreed immediately. Dr. Shipman was such a kind man, always thinking of ways to help people. He arranged to visit her home the next morning, June 24th, to take blood samples. Kathleen Grundy was no ordinary patient. She was the former mayor of Hyde, a wealthy widow. She owned 2 properties worth a combined £386,000, equivalent to over £800,000 today. She was active, healthy, vibrant for her age. She did volunteer work at several charities. She had friends, social commitments, a busy schedule. She was supposed to serve lunch at a local charity venue the morning of June 24th. She never arrived. Concerned, colleagues went to check on her. They found her front door unlocked than usual for Kathleen, who was always careful about security. They went inside and found her dead on her sofa, curled up, fully clothed. She looked peaceful, like she was sleeping. They called Dr. Shipman. He arrived quickly, examined the body briefly, and said, "Cardiac arrest. I'll sign the death certificate. Cause of death, old age." Kathleen Grundy's daughter, Angela Woodruff, was a solicitor practicing law in Warwickshire. When she heard of her mother's death, she was shocked. Her mother had seemed perfectly healthy. There had been no warning, no illness, nothing then. 2 weeks after the funeral, Angela received a phone call from Brian Burgess, a local solicitor in Hyde. He had received a will from Kathleen Grundy. It needed to be executed. Angela was confused. Her mother already had a will. Angela herself had helped draft it. So what was this new will? Burgess sent her a copy. Angela stared at it in disbelief. Asterisk, asterisk. The will was typed on plain paper. It was full of errors, grammatical mistakes, awkward phrasing, spelling errors. It looked like it had been written by someone with no legal training. And it left Kathleen Grundy's entire estate £386,000. Dr. Harold Shipman, the will claimed that Kathleen wanted to leave everything to her doctor, because my family are not in need and I want to reward him for all the care he has given me and the people of Hyde. Angela knew immediately that this will was a forgery. Her mother would never have written something like that. The language was wrong. The tone was wrong. And most damning, the will only mentioned one of her mother's 2 properties. Whoever forged this will didn't know about the second house. Angela Woodruff went to the police on July 24th, 1998. She told them she suspected Dr. Shipman of forging her mother's will and possibly murdering her this time. The police listened. On August 1st, 1998, Kathleen Grundy's body was exhumed from the cemetery. The Home Office forensic pathologist Dr. John Rutherford performed the autopsy. The results were shocking. Kathleen Grundy's body contained massive amounts of diamorphine medical-grade heroin. The level was so high it would have killed her within minutes of injection. Based on the concentration in her tissues, she had been injected within 3 hours of her death. The exact window Dr. Shipman had been at her house for the research study So the police obtained a warrant to search Shipman's home and clinic. They seized his computers, his typewriter, his medical supplies, and his patient records. The typewriter was an old Brother portable model. Several of its keys were broken or damaged, producing distinctive irregular letters. When forensic examiners compared the typewriter to Kathleen Grundy's forged will, they found a perfect match. The same broken keys, the same irregular spacing. Shipman had typed the will himself, but the most damning evidence came from Shipman's computer. When police questioned Shipman about the diamorphine found in Kathleen Grundy's body, he had an explanation ready. He showed them his computerized medical records. They clearly stated that Mrs. Grundy had been a heroin addict. She'd been using drugs for years. He documented it all in his files. The entries were dated months before her death. They seemed legitimate, but the police brought in a computer forensics expert, and what he discovered destroyed Shipman's defense completely. Shipman had altered the files after Kathleen Grundy died. He'd opened her medical record and added fake entries claiming she was a drug addict. He'd even backdated the entries to make it look like he'd known about her addiction for months. But Shipman didn't understand how computers worked. He didn't know about metadata, the hidden information every computer file contains, showing when it was created, when it was modified, and who made the changes. The forensic expert examined the metadata. The entries claiming Kathleen Grundy was a drug addict had been created on June 24, 1998, hours after she died. The computer had recorded the exact time Shipman made the changes, 6:23 p.m. Shipman had altered the medical records to cover up his crime, and the computer had caught him in the lie. On September 7, 1998, police arrested Dr. Harold Shipman at his clinic. He was 52 years old. He'd been killing for at least 23 years. Detectives began examining his other patients. They compiled a list of suspicious deaths, elderly patients who died suddenly at home shortly after visits from Shipman and were quickly cremated. The list was horrifying. They exhumed 15 more bodies. Every single one contained lethal levels of DIAM or PHAN. They examined cremation certificates going back years. A pattern emerged. Shipman always recommended cremation. He always filled out the death certificate himself. He always got a colleague to countersign without question. They interviewed the families of deceased patients. Many of them told similar stories. My mother was perfectly healthy. Then Dr. Shipman visited her for a routine checkup. 2 hours later, she was dead. He insisted she didn't need an ambulance. He said it was too late. He said she'd had a heart attack. He told us cremation was the best option. He said it was cleaner, more hygienic. We trusted him. He was the last person to see her alive. When we found her, she was sitting in her chair, fully dressed, like she'd just fallen asleep. It seemed so peaceful. The police investigated 15 sample cases for trial, but the true scope was much larger. The deaths included Marie West, 81 years old, found dead in her home on March 6, 1995. Her friend Marion Hadfield had been visiting when Shipman knocked on the door for a quick checkup. Sometime that day, Marie was found dead. Shipman signed the death certificate. Natural causes. Lizzie Adams, 77 years old, found dead at her home on February 28, 1997. Shipman claimed she died of pneumonia and said he'd called an ambulance. Police records showed no ambulance was ever called. Bianca Pomfret, 49 years old, found dead by her son on December 10, 1997, same day Shipman visited. Autopsy revealed high morphine levels. Shipman had falsified her medical records to claim she'd been complaining of chest pain. Ivy Lomas, 63 years old, died in Shipman's surgery on May 29, 1997. While waiting for an appointment, Shipman claimed she had a heart attack. No autopsy was performed. Winifred Meller, 73 years old, died at home on May 11, 1998. Her friend had just left when Shipman arrived. Minutes later, she was dead. Joan Malia, 73 years old, died on June 12, 1998, shortly after a visit from Shipman. Her son found her sitting in her chair, fully dressed, dead. Each case followed the same pattern: house call, injection, death, cremation, and all of it hidden under the authority of a doctor's signature. Harold Shipman's trial began on October 5, 1999. At Preston Crown Court, he was charged with 15 counts of murder and 1 count of forgery. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, forensic toxicology proving the victims died from diamorphine poisoning, computer metadata proving Shipman had altered medical records after deaths, occurred typewriter forensics linking Shipman to the forged will, witnesses describing Shipman as the last person to see victims, a live death certificate analysis showing Shipman's patients died at 20 times the normal rate, testimonies from families who had been suspicious but too intimidated to speak up. Shipman's defense was simple: deny everything. He claimed the victims were drug addicts. He claimed the deaths were natural. He claimed he was being persecuted. He showed no remorse, no emotion. He sat in the dock with a look of cold contempt, as if offended that anyone would question him. The jury deliberated for 6 days. On January 31, 2000, at 4:44 p.m., they returned their verdict: guilty on all 15 counts of murder, guilty of forgery. The judge, Mr. Justice Thane Forbes, sentenced Harold Shipman to 15 consecutive life sentences plus 4 years for forgery. He was given a whole life order, meaning he would never be eligible for parole. He would die in prison. As the sentence was read, victims' families wept. Some shouted at Shipman. He showed no reaction, no emotion, nothing. After Shipman's conviction, the British government ordered a public inquiry to determine the full extent of his crimes. Dame Janet Smith, a High Court judge, was appointed to lead the investigation. The Shipman inquiry examined 888 suspicious deaths. The investigation took over 2 years and produced 6 detailed reports totaling more than 2,000 pages. The findings were horrific. The inquiry confirmed that Shipman had murdered at least 215 patients between 1975 and 1998. Another 45 deaths were deemed highly suspicious but couldn't be definitively proven due to lack of evidence. Most victims had been cremated. The inquiry also investigated Shipman's early career at Pontefract General Infirmary. They found evidence of 3 additional murders between 1971 and 1974, possibly including a 4-year-old girl. This brought the confirmed deaths toll to 218 victims, but experts believe the true number is much higher. Some estimates place Shipman's victim count at 250 to 500 people, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in recorded history. The victims were 171 women and 44 men. Confirmed cases, ages ranging from 41 to 93 years old. 80% were women over 75. Most lived alone. Most were in good health before their deaths. Most died at home. Most were cremated. The inquiry also revealed disturbing patterns. Shipman was killing at an accelerating rate. In his final years, he murdered 1 person per week. He was present at 19% of all deaths among his patients, compared to just 1% for other doctors in similar practices. Relatives were less likely to have been present at deaths. 40% versus 80% in comparable practices. He killed 7 people in February 1998 alone, 1 week when he murdered almost every other day. Dame Janet Smith concluded that Shipman may have wanted to be caught when he forged Kathleen Grundy's will. The forgery was so crude, so obvious, that detection was inevitable. Perhaps he wanted attention. Perhaps he wanted the world to know what he'd done. Or perhaps, after 23 years of killing, he simply believed he was invincible. The question that haunts everyone: why? Why would a doctor, someone sworn to heal, murder hundreds of his own patients? Shipman never explained. He never confessed. He maintained his innocence until the day he died. When offered the chance to provide a victim list to give families closure, he refused. He took his secrets to the grave. Experts have proposed several theories. 1. The mother theory. Some believe Shipman was trying to recreate his mother's death. She died peacefully, with morphine administered by a doctor. Perhaps Shipman wanted to give his patients that same peaceful death to play God, to decide when suffering should end. 2. The power theory. Others suggest Shipman derived pleasure from having the power of life and death over his patients. He was arrogant, narcissistic. Killing may have been how he expressed his sense of superiority. 3. The addiction theory. Shipman was addicted to pethidine. Perhaps killing patients allowed him to steal their morphine prescriptions. But this theory doesn't explain why he killed so many, far more than would have been necessary simply to fuel an addiction for the attention theory. Some believe Shipman craved recognition. He wanted to be remembered as the greatest, the most prolific, the most successful at evading detection. The truth is probably a combination of all these factors. Shipman was a complex psychopath, narcissistic, manipulative, cold, and utterly lacking in empathy. He enjoyed killing. He was good at it, and he believed he would never be caught. Harold Shipman was sent to HM Prison Wakefield, maximum security facility in West Yorkshire. He showed no remorse. He refused to participate in any programs. He spent his days in his cell, reading, writing letters to his wife Primrose, who maintained his innocence and visited him regularly. On January 13, 2004, one day before his 58th birthday, Shipman hanged himself in his cell using bed sheets tied to the bars of his window. He was found dead at 8:10 a.m. Some of the victims' families felt cheated. They would never get answers. They would never hear a confession. They would never understand why their loved ones were taken from them. Others were relieved. "Good riddance," said one family member. "He saved the taxpayers' money." Home Secretary David Blunkett admitted, "If you wake up and you receive a call telling you Shipman has topped himself, and you think, is it too early to open a bottle?" Shipman's death divided the nation. Some newspapers called him a coward. Others celebrated. The Sun ran a front-page headline, "Ship, Ship, hooray." But one mystery remained. A former cellmate later claimed that Shipman had confessed to him shortly before his suicide. According to the cellmate, Shipman didn't kill 215 people. He didn't even kill 250. He claimed he had murdered 508 people. If true, this would make Harold Shipman the most prolific serial killer in recorded history. But without evidence, without records, without proof, this claim can never be verified. Shipman's wife, Primrose, received his full NHS pension after his death. Under British law, she would not have been entitled to the pension if Shipman had lived past age 60. Some speculate that Shipman killed himself to ensure his wife's financial security. Others believe he simply couldn't face the rest of his life in prison. Knowing he would never be free again, the Shipman case exposed catastrophic failures in the British medical system. The inquiry made dozens of recommendations, many of which were implemented. 1. Death certification reform. The system was completely overhauled. Doctors can no longer sign death certificates for their own patients without oversight. Random audits are now conducted. 2. Controlled drug monitoring. Doctors are no longer allowed to stockpile controlled substances like morphine and diamorphine. Strict regulations govern their use. 3. Cremation certificate changes. The countersigning doctor must now be completely independent and must actually examine the body. 4. Whistleblower protection. Doctors who report suspicious colleagues are now protected from retaliation. 5. General Medical Council reform. The GMC was heavily criticized for protecting doctors at the expense of patients. Reforms made it easier to investigate and discipline problem doctors. The Shipman case changed British medicine forever. It shattered the trust between doctors and patients. It exposed how easily a respected professional could manipulate the system. And it raised a terrifying question. How many other Harold Shipmans are out there, still undetected? Harold Shipman killed for 23 years. He murdered at least 215 people, possibly as many as 500. He evaded detection through careful planning, manipulation, and exploitation of a broken system. But in the end, he made one mistake. He got greedy. He forged a will on a typewriter with broken keys. He altered computer files without understanding metadata. He underestimated a lawyer daughter who refused to accept that her mother's death was natural. That one mistake brought down a monster who had hidden in plain sight for more than 2 decades. The lesson is clear. No system is perfect. No amount of trust should be blind. And sometimes, the most dangerous predators are the ones who wear white coats and smile warmly while they inject poison into your veins. Harold Shipman is dead, but his legacy lives in a reminder that evil can hide behind respectability, that monsters can masquerade as healers, and that we must always question, always investigate, and never assume that someone is above suspicion simply because of their title or position. The world's most prolific serial killer was finally stopped. Not by detective work, not by forensic science, but by a single daughter who trusted her instincts and refused to let her mother's death go unquestioned. Sometimes, that's all it takes. One person who refuses to look away.